Today's topic is another race relations conversation, and I'm in the studio today with my friend Alan Parr. We're talking today about this idea of being a black man in the workplace.
Yeah.
How is that any different than me being in the workplace? Is it really that big of a deal?
Yeah, so once again, just another great question, a conversation that I'm really super excited about, because having more of these conversations really help both sides really understand each other a lot better.
Yeah.
So there is this phrase that is kind of really popular in the African American context, and it's this idea of double consciousness. And if I mention that to white people, they may be like, well, what does that mean? I've never heard of that, right?
No, I've never heard of it.
Right, exactly. So if you Google it, you'll see that double consciousness is this idea that as an African American male, we have to be able to exist, and not only exist, but to really thrive in two totally different cultures. So for instance, and give you an example, if I were to go to a barbecue or a family reunion with my friends or my family or one of my friends' families or whatever, you may hear that same executive that's working for a Fortune 500 company, you may see him slapping some dominoes down, playing some cards, listening to some rap music or whatever, and using slang purposely because either that's kind of how they grew up, or they're trying to fit in with the people in their family and their community or whatnot.
So what if you talk like you would at work in that setting? What would happen?
Right. So once again, depending upon the people in that family, if they're all very educated and very elitist, if you will, then it probably wouldn't be an issue. But if you have this situation where this African American male, maybe he was the first in his family to graduate from college or whatnot, and he comes from an environment where there aren't a lot of educated people in his family, then they may look at him like, oh, you think that you just arrived, or, matter of fact, growing up, I heard this saying all the time, you talk white.
Really?
You talk white. Just because I had spoke proper English and I didn't, I didn't use a lot of slang in the way I was speaking.
Yeah. And it was a put down.
It was a put down, right, because I'm not white, but then it's also offensive because it's like, why is it that correct English, proper English is associated with talking white? And so we've had to learn, for those of us who have been in corporate America, how can you thrive and how can you exist in both worlds? Because you don't want to be shunned from your family. You don't want to be put down there and be seen as some sellout black guy. But then you also can't take that same slang that you talked, that you use in your family and your friends or whatnot at the barbecue, and then go to work and say, hey, yo, what's up, man? How you doing, man? I'm feeling all right, man. Because then you'll be viewed as just another black guy. How did he even get in here? Who hired him? That sort of thing. And so we have to basically be conscious of living in both worlds at all times.
So does it make you feel like a hypocrite to be one way in one world and another way in another world?
Yeah, and once again, that's a great question. And I think the struggle that I personally, I can't speak for every black man, but I can say from me personally, and even some of the friends that I've talked to, is that sometimes it's very difficult because you almost don't feel like you fit in perfectly in either of the two worlds.
Right.
I don't, as a African American male who was raised by an educated mother and father, who taught me how to speak proper English and was stressing the importance of education and all those different things. It's like sometimes I don't feel like I fit in perfectly with the traditional black crowd because I don't use slang. I'd almost have to purposely change the way I normally talk to use purposeful slang to try to fit in with them. So I don't feel like that's naturally who I am, right? But then I also don't feel like I naturally fit in the white world simply because I'm just not white. I've not had those experiences or whatnot. And and there's also this idea as well, I might as well talk about this very quickly. There's this idea of white privilege, that once again, if I talk about that in the black context, we all know what that means. And it's the idea that, African Americans don't always get away with the same things, or don't always have the same opportunities, that are afforded to them in the white context. A perfect example of that would be, the President of the United States, right? So the question we would have to all ask ourselves on an honest level would be this: if there was an African American man running for the presidency, and he had multiple affairs, had said certain things about his daughter being beautiful and he'd marry his daughter and different things like that, said some of the things 2 women that we saw on those tapes had been married 3 times. The question would be, would he have any shot at all at being the president of the United States? And the answer, I think we'd all agree, would be no, right? But how is it possible that President Trump was able to have all those experiences? We see all that stuff, but yet and this is not, I'm not against President Trump, I'm not I'm not a pro-Obama, I'm not any of that, but just trying to bring to light the issue that there is this idea of white privilege that we often kind of struggle with in African American context.
So let's end with this, Alan. If you were speaking to a white executive, what would you say, if you could say anything to him? What would you say to him to help be aware of this, or maybe be part of a solution for a guy in the workplace who feels that he's got this pressure to have this double consciousness? Is there any solution? Can we help at all in this context?
Well, I think that, the biggest thing here would be, creating situations and conversations at the job. They really help people get more comfortable with this idea of diversity.
Yeah.
And really just accepting people, and not, once again, as judging somebody and saying that, man, if I do hear a little bit of slang from this guy, that doesn't mean that he's uneducated. It just means that that's his culture. That's kind of how he grew up. And really, once again, just kind of assessing somebody based on their work and what they contribute to the company, and not maybe, making a decision based on, maybe their preconceived notions or their stereotypes of African American men or whatnot. And also just not seeing us always as some threat, right? I mean, we're just basic guys trying to provide for our families just like anyone else, and we just want a fair shot. If we're not the best guy for the job, then I don't want the job. I don't want to be given the job just because I'm black, because I'm some token and I want to, increase your diversity numbers. But if I am the best guy for the job, then I would hope that, everybody will be able to put down their barriers and, their preconceived notions and prejudices and say, man, this is the best guy for the job. Let's give him a shot.
That's good.